Good afternoon, everybody. This is a live emergency update as the tropical Atlantic is absolutely going nuts. A very energized intertropical convergence zone is something that we normally see during the month of August, and it is still a little bit further south. A lot of these storms are just going to be hugging the northern coast of South America, but the next disturbance that's coming out is showing a low probability of development over the next 5 days that could interact with the Lesser Antilles, maybe even far enough north to interact with the Greater Antilles as well. This is 94L, that is just to the east of the Lesser Antilles, and it is forecast to possibly become a tropical depression as it arrives near the warmer water a little bit closer to the Lesser Antilles tomorrow or maybe the next day, and then it's off into the Caribbean Sea, and it looks like it's going to be the southern Caribbean Sea. A majority of the models in about 5 or 6 days take 94L as a pretty potent tropical cyclone, maybe even as a hurricane near the northeastern coastline of Nicaragua or eastern coastline of Honduras. There are still a couple of members that take it a little bit north, barely missing Honduras, maybe even interacting with Belize or the southern Yucatan, but right now a vast majority of those models take it into Central America, which is setting the stage to be a mega disaster down there. Any tropical cyclone that comes into Nicaragua or Honduras, the infrastructure just can't support the amount of water up there. There are big mountains, landslides, flash floods, absolute mass chaos up there. We're also watching the northern Gulf of Mexico. There's a cluster of shower and thunderstorms, and it does look like that's going to drift off to the west-southwest in a relatively favorable environment for slow organization. Temperatures are above 30 degrees Celsius across the north-central Gulf of Mexico. My good friend Brandon Clement told me that Lake Pontchartrain is actually in the mid-90s right now during late June, which is incredibly hot water out there. Very warm water across the northern Gulf of Mexico. We've had this large, sprawling anticyclone across the mid-south that has contributed to big-time hot temperatures, sunny skies, and that allows the northern Gulf of Mexico to continue to cook big-time bathwater out across the northern Gulf of Mexico. And so we're going to break down all of these disturbances one by one. And we do have a relatively favorable Gulf of Mexico, as we mentioned, for this disturbance. These bright colors, that spin in the atmosphere, they have a bit of an upper level low that is down about this, a little positively tilted upper level low that extends down into southern Florida, into the Bahamas. That could be associated with some much needed rainfall across central and south Florida. But this cluster of storms just south of Louisiana, it's right over the really warm water of the Gulf of Mexico, and that's going to drift off to the west-southwest with favorable upper levels for organization. And many of the models are taking it into the central or southern Gulf Coast as a tropical depression or maybe even a tropical storm. You know how these things go in the northern Gulf of Mexico, but it's going to be impacting central and southern Texas mid to late week. That's about the same time that I might want to head down to northeastern Nicaragua to intercept a potential Hurricane Bonnie down much further south. But as I mentioned, we got to keep an eye on this northern disturbance. This infrared satellite imagery shows you that even though there is some cloud cover, showers, and storms, we're not really seeing a ton of that deep convection. Not very deep convection with cold cloud tops. Looks like the western edge of this cluster near the Sabine River is starting to bubble up. A little bit more bubbling too on the southeastern edge of the cluster. Looking at the surface map, the easterly winds along the southern coast of Louisiana are starting to increase, so there is just a little bit of a weak low pressure that's trying to form in the northern Gulf of Mexico. This is definitely going to be associated with some pretty heavy rain near the Galveston area as those storms begin to come ashore. Might even be some water spouts out there. Additionally, along the Texas coastline. Look at the Gulf of Mexico temperatures right now. These sea surface temperatures are nuts. I try to look at the raw temperatures a little bit more. We do try to get fixated on the anomalies a little bit, but you can see that the water throughout the Gulf of Mexico, much greater than 27 degrees C, and right up across the north central Gulf of Mexico, where those showers and thunderstorms are bubbling all the way back to the Sabine River, greater than 30 degrees Celsius. So that's extremely warm water for this time of year across the northern Gulf of Mexico. A little bit of upwelling off the northern coast of the Yucatan. Not too worried about that. And even in the Caribbean Sea, temperatures are quite warm. As long as you're north of about 27 degrees Celsius, warmer than about 80 degrees Fahrenheit as a sea surface temperature, then a tropical cyclone, given favorable upper level conditions for intensification, generally will continue to strengthen. But that's the northern Gulf of Mexico, relatively warm, and it does look like there is the potential that this storm could be maybe even a tropical cyclone. Very low chance. It's going to be a low-end tropical cyclone. There you can see that spin, brighter and brighter colors as it drifts toward the central Texas coastline, maybe even South Texas. I might even head out to Flash Flood Alley in South Texas, maybe northeastern Mexico, to intercept some of those flash floods or debris flows from this tropical cyclone as it heads in. But I really am keeping an eye on 94L, which looks like it's probably going to become Tropical Cyclone Bonnie in the coming days. Maybe even tomorrow it could become a tropical depression. These are the latest hurricane models, and this is from one of my favorite sites for monitoring the tropics, tropicaltidbits.com by Dr. Levi Cohen. He's over, I believe he's working at the National Hurricane Center now in Miami. But tropicaltidbits.com, just an incredible website. If you want to head over there, follow these storms yourself, follow the different hurricane models, satellite imagery, all the resources you can follow hurricane reconnaissance to. These are the hurricane models showing you, usually earlier in the season, the intertropical convergence zone is a little bit further south, and it gradually migrates north until peak position in the fall, late summer into the fall, further north. That's when a lot of those hurricanes will head even over the greater Antilles, intersecting some of the mountainous terrain of Hispaniola and Cuba. Sometimes that can even shred tropical systems. This one's still pretty far south, but the intertropical convergence zone is very active. Multiple disturbances out there that we're watching, even disturbances in a tropical cyclone on the eastern Pacific side. There is some warmer water out there as the upwelling is starting to wane. I think that the trade winds are starting to weaken out there, but you can see a majority of even the hurricane models take this thing toward Nicaragua. Couple outliers a little bit further north. Let's look at the global models, a more useful tool for assessing steering flows long term for these systems. This is the GFS, the ensemble, and you can see that a majority of those members take this thing into Nicaragua, which would be an absolute mega disaster, even if it's a weaker system. You can see in general that the further south tracks are a weaker tropical cyclone. The yellows, oranges, and reds are a stronger tropical cyclone, which the further north tracks are a stronger tropical cyclone. Further south, interacting a little bit with the land of northern Venezuela and Colombia, the coastline. Could cause a little bit of a weaker tropical cyclone, but in general, the stronger tracks are a little bit further north. And I'm watching a couple of these outliers in about 5 or 6 days that take a pretty stout tropical cyclone, a hurricane into Belize, maybe even the southern Yucatan. If that happened, I would definitely consider intercepting that tropical cyclone, probably over the Gulf of Mexico disturbance that would head toward Texas, bringing flooding rains, the potential also for a water spouts. Additionally, could easily get some water spouts across that terrain. But I'm obviously pivoting to hurricane season and monsoon. That often happens during the summer months. I am battling a little bit of logistics issues right now. Dominator 4 still in the shop. A lot of part shortages these days as well. And that's one of the main reasons why I haven't shot off to the west just yet. But now we have an early activation of the tropics. That is definitely happening. And here is the intensity, the hurricane models showing the intensity of the different members. And a couple of those, including the infamous ship model, show this thing becoming even a major hurricane on approach to Central America. That includes the Yucatan. A majority of the models, though, bring this storm into low-end hurricane strength into the Caribbean, where even though you just have slightly negative anomalies, the sea surface temperatures in the Caribbean are some of the warmest of any basin out there, of any sea. Similar to the Gulf of Mexico, which is a very hot body of water. The Caribbean, even though it is just a little bit below normal, basically near normal, you still have those temperatures well into the 80s out ahead of it. So sea surface temperatures with this southern track, not going to be an issue. And the upper level conditions are becoming increasingly favorable as well over the open Atlantic for this to continue to intensify. Let me show you the latest, again, from the National Hurricane Center, showing you these disturbances. You've got the one in the northern Gulf of Mexico, low chance of development. These are over the next 5 days. You have a new tropical wave off the coastline of West Africa that is also showing a low chance of development even before the Lesser Antilles. In about 5 days, that's going to be arriving. These are the Lesser Antilles. These are the Greater Antilles. This is the Caribbean Sea. Gulf of Mexico as well. These disturbances are a part of the intertropical convergence zone, which seasonally is pretty close to the northern coastline of South America. Oftentimes during the early season, you'll get a lot of dust that will come off the coastline of West Africa, but it does look like an energized monsoon season, an early monsoon over the West African Sahel. Just churning these MCSs, these disturbances off as easterly waves. And then as they approach the Lesser Antilles, you get a little bit warmer water out here. And that should promote development into a tropical depression, and then will likely become a hurricane as it passes into the southern Caribbean Sea. A couple of those members do show impact pretty close to Belize or the southern Yucatan. And if that happens, I'm going to roll in there. I'm going to rent another car, drop south, and I probably will chase Bonnie if it intensifies. If Bonnie looks like it's going to be relatively weak and kind of hugs the South American coastline, maybe even get absorbed by northern South America, that coastline, then I'll probably head out to the Texas coast, intercept that flash flood potential. It looks like the southwest U.S. monsoon might be a little bit slower. I almost deployed to Flagstaff yesterday for that flash flooding. There were a couple of flash flood warnings that were issued across southern Utah. I checked out the Paria River gauges near Kanab and also at Lee's Ferry, and couldn't even find a flood that came through last night. I'm wondering if some of the data maybe didn't register the flood. Maybe the thing was just too small to register. But there were a couple of flash flood warnings also that were issued for downtown Flagstaff. A little bit of flooding there. I didn't really see any evidence of debris flows. A couple of flash flood warnings again down near Phoenix and near Tucson. I'm wondering if during the early season, if we're starting to get a little overestimation of the rainfall, and actually with the precipitable water a little bit lower, those dew points kind of into the upper 50s, 60s, central and southern Arizona. If in the early season we're seeing more in the way of haboob potential and also kind of these higher base lightning storms, I think as we get a little bit closer to the heart of monsoon season into July and we get that high that forms over the Four Corners region, a little bit more moisture influx, then I think I'll be rolling out to the desert southwest to intercept debris plugs. But I'm watching this complex of storms in the northern Gulf of Mexico. It looks like there's a lot more vigorous convection over the western edge of this blob, and this is probably going to be what's going to drift southwest, probably toward Corpus Christi eventually, down toward Corpus, maybe Victoria area, maybe even further south toward Brownsville in northeastern Mexico. The longer it's over these warm waters that are just cooking across the north central Gulf, basically Sabine River all the way to the Mississippi, that's where the hottest ocean surface temperatures are located in the Gulf of Mexico. So today's going to be a big day for these bubblers to congeal, and we are starting to get some cloud cover as well over the northeastern Texas coastline, starting to move into the Galveston Island area. I've seen a couple of tweets from vacationers that are heading to Galveston Island, and I told them over the next few days, just be prepared for heavy rain, lightning potential, maybe some water spouts as well along the coastline there. Could easily happen as that thing drifts off to the southwest with favorable upper conditions for organization. Sea surface temperatures relatively warm out here across the northern Gulf of Mexico, and so I wouldn't be surprised if that thing does intensify into a tropical cyclone. I want to take a look at some of the radar imagery too. We were looking at the health of some of those cloud tops. Looks a lot more robust over the western Gulf of Mexico. Here's the infrared satellite. Definitely showing some of those bubblers a little bit more prominent over the western Gulf of Mexico, just offshore of Galveston Island. So I do want to get a little bit closer to radar imagery and see if there are any more vigorous updrafts that might even cause some water spout potential as this cluster of storms. This is what it takes to get a disturbance like this to develop into a tropical cyclone. You need a ton of showers and storms. They need to cluster together. Basically, this needs to be a large-scale MCS. It does look like some of these storms are propagating around with northeasterly flow on the western edge of that broad area of low pressure. You can see some of these cloud tops that are coming inland as well, probably in response to the developing southerly flow getting funneled up the Sabine River. So once that surface flow gets closed, then it's going to become a tropical depression, but you need a lot more storms. You need bubblers all over this thing. Once these storms start to cluster together, rapid condensation happens. You get the release of latent heat within the column. As you get big time condensation, that latent heat leads to surface pressure falls. That leads to more low level convergence that happens, more wind that comes in toward the low pressure. That leads to the development of even more thunderstorms. More thunderstorms mean the release of more latent heat. That leads to more rapid surface pressure falls. And it's that positive feedback mechanism that leads to the formation of a tropical cyclone. And it happens down in the tropical and subtropical belts of the ocean, where you get a lot of reduced wind shear, more barotropic environments. These hurricanes do not thrive off of the temperature gradients of the extratropics that drive the upper level jet stream. But let's take a look at some of the showers and storms that are offshore right now. Let's see if they're popping on radar, on Houston radar. Here are some of these storms. And they're visible from Houston radar. Not very healthy. And a lot of times these storms will blow up in the overnight hours. That's the diurnal cycle. Is overnight you'll see these tropical systems when they're over the ocean, or even just clusters of storms. They blow up at night. You have kind of a greater temperature difference between the ocean and the overlying atmosphere. And in general, you just get stronger, more vigorous storms that happen at night. Then you come in during the day and they suppress a little bit with a diurnal cycle, and then they ramp back up in the overnight hours. But here's Galveston off in the northern section of the view here, looking south. And this is the blob of showers and storms that are showing up with those high tops on infrared satellite. You have some more vigorous isolated storms that are developing downstream of this thing. Certainly not seeing any closed rotation. You just kind of are seeing this broad east-northeasterly and northeasterly flow out here in response to a very weak low pressure. It's going to take a lot more storms to get this to organize into a tropical system. Now, we can watch this process as it happens during the day today. I also want to show you the upper level the satellite imagery for our disturbance. This is 94L. And 94L appeared to almost be named a tropical depression last night. With a diurnal explosion of convection. There it is down there. Look at that thing explode overnight. Now the convection is weakening a little bit as we're coming into the mid-afternoon hours out here in the open Atlantic. And usually as you go during the middle of the day, it's a convective minimum. See that convection decrease. The black color, the whites especially, and even the purples, that shows colder cloud tops, more vigorous convection up here. This is the next wave that has been given a low chance of development further out in the open Atlantic by the National Hurricane Center. But this top right here, look at those convective elements right near the center of the low pressure. Sure looked like that almost, at least based on satellite, it sure looked like it was trying to develop a closed center last night, but now we've had a reduction in the convection as this thing is heading off to the west. However, the National Hurricane Center expects that as this disturbance gets closer to those warmer sea surface temperatures, that it could easily become a tropical depression in the next 48 hours as it continues to cruise off to the west. But this is the intertropical convergence zone. These clusters of storms out here, this thing is relatively far to the south, but it's very energized for this time of year. Normally, during late June, this is relatively suppressed. You get Saharan dust out as well, but you can see as these storms form, they are associated with a little bit of spin. That's because of the latent heat release that happens with big time condensation. You get low level pressure falls, you get some cyclonic curvature, and you can just see all these individual clusters of storms when they ramp up. A lot of times they are associated with vorticity as well. That's why they're called hot towers. These are hot towers because they're producing a ton of latent heat, those convective towers. But you really want to watch a little closer to the tropical wave, which it is basically an open wave right now. An easterly wave. These are easterly winds, trade winds in an easterly direction. And to have cyclonic curvature, it's kind of an open wave like that. You have southerly winds on its east side. You have winds that are going equatorward on the west side. That is associated with cyclonic vorticity. associated with a little bit of convergence that causes these convective flare-ups, especially overnight in the middle of the night. They really blow up, and then during the day, the convection suppresses just a little bit. But this tropical wave is going to continue to cruise off to the west, and the upper levels become increasingly favorable, but especially we have increasing sea surface temperatures in the long term that are going to make that a storm to watch. The RAP analysis does include, we've got a zone here in the northern Gulf of Mexico. Where we can see our convective clusters out there. You can see a little surface wind field painted on there as well. You basically have easterlies across much of the Gulf of Mexico, and then they start to shift toward more of a northerly direction. And in general, that little wind shift is associated with this disturbance. It's a cyclonic wind shift. Cyclonic curvature in general is an anticyclonic. You can also see the RAP try to paint just a very subtle low pressure area near that convective burst just offshore of the Sabine River. When we covered Hurricane Laura for National Geographic, we had an Airbnb out here at the Sabine River. The power went out, of course. We went back there. And man, I've never been lit up by insects more in my entire life than that night. There was a dead sow, too, very sadly, in the front yard. One of those, a giant pig must have escaped from its owner. And we came back to the Airbnb. There were all these flies just hovering around the sow in the front yard of that Airbnb. But we got lit up by multiple different waves of insects. Cattle flies came out first. The mosquitoes came, no-see-ums, and they were all biting us at the same time as well. And bug spray was not working out there. So I started spraying Windex on my legs. Just put Windex glass cleaner, just anything that would work. It was insane. And no power, so the temperature inside of this place was about 100 degrees, and all the bugs found their way into the house as well. And our whole production team was out there. But absolute hell on earth that night, just getting lit up by all those insects. But that was definitely a crazy story from chasing that hurricane in 2020. All of those impacts along the Gulf of Mexico. You had Hurricane Laura, you had Hurricane Sally in the Gulf Shores area. Hurricane Delta came in like 12 miles to the east of where Hurricane Laura made landfall. And then you had a very active season last year, too, with Hurricane Ida, the big impact once again into southern Louisiana. But you can already see the RAP analysis even showing some subtle surface pressure falls associated with that eastern blob. I bet what'll happen is this will die out and peter out as it slides off to the southwest, and we'll probably get another reinvigoration later on today or in the overnight hours tonight with some additional convective bursts that may develop across that area. $850 winds, you can at least see some convergence here of the 850s. Easterlies across the northern Gulf of Mexico. At the very least, that system, even if it doesn't fully develop into a tropical cyclone, it is going to be associated with flooding rains by the time that gets into the and in fact, just over the next several days, that's probably going to be associated with flooding rains over the Texas coast. Nothing yet by the Weather Prediction Center yet about painting a big flood zone. I think everybody wants to make sure that this system is able to mature first. 24 hours from now, that's late tonight, 6Z, still looking at the 6Z runs. Let's go to the 12Z GFS. So this is late Tuesday night, midnight Tuesday night, shows the disturbance south of the Sabine River, still east of the Texas coastline. And as we go through the day on Wednesday, a little bit of a bubbler out here, but it seems to try to organize starting on Wednesday, especially as it's getting a little bit closer to the Texas coastline. Sometimes these will organize into a little tropical storm that'll make landfall. You can see overall the spin The vorticity seems to increase on this as that develops. There's the circulation seen at 850, just this northeasterly flow. Seems to be a bit of a tilted system also, slightly tilted. But there's the Vort. By Wednesday, it's already just offshore of Brownsville. Onshore flow. Maybe a Corpus Christi trip tomorrow could be in the books. I really want to keep an eye on a potential Central America run. And boy, does that look like a potential tropical depression. Closing in on the Brownsville area on Wednesday. Definitely dumping some very heavy rainfall, maybe even some flooding rains down in Brownsville. Models don't do an incredibly good job at ramping these systems up. A lot of times just as they're coming in their early season. We get these storms, and not seeing even a ton of rainfall being indicated by the GFS model, but eventually that blob does drift ashore. Models aren't doing very good at that. In fact, they show a lot heavier rain over southern Georgia and northern Florida. It's a little bit closer to that upper level low. There you go. There it is on Thursday late morning. And definitely you don't want to be as focused on where the center is on these storms. It's usually probably north of the center where you're going to get the heavier rain. Corpus Christi all the way up to the Houston area, at least according to the GFS right now. Possibly some fairly heavy rain, water spout potential that could happen. Total accumulation in millimeters there. Nice. We like it. Shows some of the heavier rain right in the central Texas Gulf Coast with that disturbance. So that could be an issue right here. Could easily get a flooding event. Corpus, Victoria, kind of enclosed by Corpus and Houston. Showing more of a heavy rain event that could transpire. Look at some of these heavier totals just offshore. Over a foot of rain just offshore from this according to the NAM model. But definitely has that little predecessor band that sets up. A little tropical moisture connection. Big heavy band of rain over the next 84 hours. Definitely the big issue is going to be flooding with this. We had that potential tropical cyclone that went over southern Florida. All those crazy videos out of Miami as the clubbers were getting out with mass chaos. Probably see similar scenes out here along the central Texas coastline. And if this blob comes ashore, we're going to have some big problems down into South Texas, even northeastern Mexico, flash floods. If this is able to penetrate inland a bit, flash flood alley. And the Texas Hill Country would activate. Right now, the models kind of drift this offshore and then dissipate the system over northeastern Mexico or southern Texas. But right now, it looks like a very heavy rain event that could be on tap for the central Texas Gulf Coast. We're just going to have to keep an eye on that. Models don't really spin up a very strong system at all. The NAM likes to. You're not supposed to use the NAM, though. But sometimes randomly the NAM is the only model that's right, especially with these little systems in their early season. Doesn't do well with ocean surfaces though. But boy, look at the NAM. Just meanders that thing offshore of Texas for days. Offshore of northeastern Mexico. That's Wednesday morning. The NAM keeps it offshore, and then by Wednesday morning starts to drift it a little bit closer to Brownsville. And then it lifts it due north again by Thursday. Kind of a wobbler out there, which would be big problems along the coastline. Big problems. This is Wednesday night. Wednesday night into Thursday. Thursday meanders it back to the north. Late morning Thursday. And then it comes in near Corpus. So it looks like this, at least the NAM model is showing quite a wobbler out here, but many of the models just show kind of a weak little disturbance coming in. Quite a bit of rainfall. European model, a lot of times, is in bed with the NAM. Real similar. This is Wednesday night. That system will be offshore. That's Wednesday night, Wednesday afternoon, Wednesday morning. Just a bubbler of a system. This is by Tuesday afternoon. Tomorrow afternoon, this system finally starts to organize. Looks like it'll develop maybe closed rotation. Could be a potential tropical cyclone or a tropical depression even. We're looking at the European model now. Look at these easterlies on the northern section that get a lot more organized. And look at the precipitation. It's offshore most of the day on Tuesday, and then starts to come ashore on Wednesday. Wednesday morning, Wednesday afternoon. Wednesday night. Boom, this rain hugging the shoreline. And boy, a lot of the models are showing a wobbler out here on the central Texas coastline. European model, GFS, NAM model, showing this thing developing. This looks like a potential big flash flood event. Big coastal flooding event, river flooding event, all along the Texas coastline from Galveston down to Brownsville. Got to keep an eye on this. Big rainmaker. It's not going to be a big hurricane at all, but it is going to be probably, it could even be a mega disaster. Sometimes these very slow moving wobblers of a tropical system can dump just prolific amounts of rainfall. And there's probably going to be some tornadoes out here as well that could happen. Definitely going to get some flood potential across the Texas coastline. So I got to decide whether I'm going to be covering, this week I'm going to be covering this rainmaker event, or am I going to be going down to the southern Yucatan of Mexico, Belize, maybe even northeastern Nicaragua for the potential formation of Bonnie. It's like I need to update the crawl text here, don't I? This is a tropical update with the Atlantic Basin very active with disturbances that could become cyclones. We are tracking 94L east of the Lesser Antilles, and also a disturbance in the northern Gulf of Mexico. Boom. My crawl has been updated. My ticker. See what the rain has with the European model. Oh, wow. European model has those big rainfall totals. Several inches of rainfall. Port Lavaca, Texas. But boy, if that blob that a lot of the models have offshore over the western Gulf of Mexico were to penetrate into Texas, that's going to cause even more problems. But nevertheless, the tropical cyclone just meanders offshore of the Texas coastline, continues to meander offshore, and that is going to be something that we're going to watch. As I mentioned earlier, though, this thing has a long way to go. The showers and thunderstorms are really just starting to propagate southward. You're getting more and more thunderstorms that are showing. Some of these northern ones have already been pretty tapped out. But what we're going to see, I think, is a lot more of these storms developing over the southwestern periphery of the cloud shield. And this thing is just going to gradually propagate off to the west-southwest. It's possible that by tomorrow night, we might start to get a closed circulation developing with this. Maybe even be a tropical depression on Wednesday. And it's possible that this could even be a low-end tropical storm as it meanders off the Texas coastline. The middle to later portion of this week. Could even become a mega flood disaster over the Texas coastline. Water spouts. Maybe up to a foot of rainfall, depending on how organized this storm system is able to become. I'm going to check on the chats here, everybody. Thank you, moderators. Thank you, Facebook. Thank you, YouTube. Thank you, Twitch. This is a live multi-platform stream that we are dominating right now. Just coming up here to say hello and look at some of the live chat. Platform stream. Whoa! Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Reed Dusterman, there he is. Another Reed. Double E as well. How's it going? And thank you for the donation. It's good that you are in Phoenix out there. There's another Reed out in Phoenix too, a Reed Stowe that I know from out there, a video game developer. But yeah, definitely. Probably will head back to Phoenix again at some point. Maybe I'll head up. Yeah, Alex, I'm actually thinking about doing all of these live briefings just for Facebook subscribers and just for YouTube memberships. I tend to take a deeper dive on these live briefings, and they don't appeal to a wide audience. It seems like only the very serious weather enthusiasts really like to take these deeper dives. I'm not as good with the tropics, though. But, you know, I obviously took all the tropical meteorology courses all the way through grad school and everything. I love the tropics. I'm interested in it. But I am a lot better at forecasting the small-scale weather, severe weather specifically. But I can also forecast the tropics. I understand the underlying meteorology. I understand the basics of anomalies and average temperatures and the mathematics as well, kind of the barotropics, but the role of hot towers and latent heat release and a little bit on steering flow, some on beta drift and whatnot. But I have worked with a lot of the people with storm chasing video games over the years. Thank you, Gina K. Thank you for your moderation. Thank you, Free Bird. Thank you, Calm as Chamomile. Thank you, Troll Chasers. Never stop chasing. Hit that notification bell ahead of tropical season because I'm going to try to expand a little bit more internationally. I've got a data plan that will work out there as well, but I also need to focus on chasing here locally a lot more. So I got to decide whether I'm going to be heading down to Belize or the southern Yucatan for Bonnie. There's a chance, though, that it could interact a little bit too much with the northern coastline of South America. And that could cause it to be a weaker system. And in that case, I'll probably cover the mega flood here along the Texas coastline. I totally understand, Stormbird, and that's totally acceptable. I know that these are some hard times these days. We might just keep doing these live briefings for everybody too, but we're trying to figure out what type of content to put in there. I'll do a live Q&A tonight for Facebook supporters exclusively. It's been like a month since our last one, so it's time for me to keep those up. I'm working closely with Brian, though, as well. Brian O'Toole, my former producer from Storm Chasers. So we're working on making a lot of improvements to our operation here, to our YouTube operation, to our science. We're going to expand our science mission even more so, expand our storm chasing. So it seems like an appropriate time just to let it rip as well. I do want to play a storm chasing video game. There's the Outbreak guys, OUTBRK up in Quebec, and we've been working with them. They have the Dominator storm chasing vehicle in there. They even added Daniel Shaw's vehicle recently as a vehicle that you can control. We saw those sea surface temperatures in the Gulf of Mexico. Here's 94L cruising along out there. It almost became a tropical depression, it looks like, last night into the morning hours out here, but the convective cluster has weakened quite a bit. See some other blobs. Maybe these storms off to the north will get entrained into the tropical wave. They're probably up on the northern section of the wave. But it'll take a big cluster like this developing in the middle of the night to excite a lot of surface pressure falls, and then that can lead to a big time storm. But I'm going to be driving around in these hurricanes. Definitely, that's what I do. That's why a lot of times I chase solo, just because it's not very safe for the normal chaser to be out there, and so I try to just go by myself. And Dominator 4 is getting fixed up right now, big time. Have a good one, Cheryl. Yeah, we're working on some new storm chasing vehicle concepts as well, so stay tuned on that. Maybe a Dominator 5 might be in the docket. Dominator 5 could be something that we try to roll out. I mean, we need to. Dominator 3, I'm in the process of acquiring that. And then I want to fix up Dominator 1 and 2, get Dominator 4 back out in the field. So I do want to show you the European model now. This is just one model, not an ensemble. But just so we can watch how it handles some of these disturbances and tropical waves. Let me also get the timestamp on here. There we go. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to this live weather report as the tropics absolutely on steroids right now. So there you can see 94L just hugging the South American coastline at this time. You've got the next disturbance, which has a low chance of development back behind it. This is the European model, the 6C European model. But if that is too close to the coastline of Venezuela and Colombia, then that would also cause a weaker tropical cyclone. Look at these big easterlies with the energized intertropical convergence zone. You can even see shadows from the mountainous terrain of the Lesser Antilles, each of those islands. This is the next disturbance. And it is possible that if this storm hugs the coastline of South America too closely, that it might lead to a weaker system. And that would definitely take it into central or even southern Nicaragua. Look at this monster sprawling high off the southeast. That has contributed to a relative lack of the daytime summer thunderstorms that we often get over the Florida Peninsula and the coastline of the southeast. A drought condition out there. We've had a very strong high pressure off the southeastern U.S. and a lobe has extended to the west. That's kind of prevented a lot of these storm systems too from diving into it, but definitely has helped to energize Gulf of Mexico moisture. It looks like the European wants to dive this thing toward southern Nicaragua. And some of the a couple members of the GFS try to take it just north of Honduras and then possibly toward Belize, but not sure if that's going to happen. GFS has it hugging the coastline of South America so closely too, kind of impeding development a bit. If it takes a slightly further north track, then it would be a stronger tropical cyclone, a stronger hurricane. The ship model has it even reaching a Category 3 over the relatively warm Caribbean, but the operational models do take this thing just grazing the northern coastline of South America, and that would maybe lead to a delayed formation over the Bay of Campeche. And it would lead to a further south track. Either way, it's going to be a big rainmaker for portions of Central America in about 6 days, 5 or 6 days. This would be Friday. It's very possible I could chase the South Texas disturbance and rainmaker and maybe even make it down to Nicaragua for a relatively intense tropical cyclone on approach to the east coast of Nicaragua. A very difficult area to chase, however. I actually got married in Nicaragua about 7 years ago. On top of Messiah volcano. I'm no longer married now, unfortunately, but this storm is going to be drifting toward the coastline of Nicaragua, eastern coastline, a beautiful area there, tropical. Managua is on the west side or central western side of Nicaragua. A much different climate on the western side than the eastern side. You have a dry season, a rainy season out there on the western side. A lot of the volcanoes are in western Nicaragua. Beautiful state, beautiful country for nature too. There's these large freshwater lakes that are old volcano eruptions, craters, filled up with fresh water. It's like freshwater sharks that live in those too across western Nicaragua. There's even a place that you can snowboard down a volcano, just pure ash that's out there. But this has a pretty intense Bonnie arriving on the coastline of Nicaragua, even with that far southern track. This is just the latest GFS, the 6Z GFS. Has it really intensifying on approach to Nicaragua too. This is the Bay of Campeche, by the way. This is the Caribbean Sea. Look at the 12Z GFS. Has a very intense storm coming into central Nicaragua. This is a very difficult place, though, to intercept tropical cyclones. Probably even a dangerous place to intercept. You'd likely be trapped down there for a while. You also kind of have to... Can be a challenge sometimes, also working with... Just can be difficult logistically out there, but that's a pretty intense tropical cyclone approaching the coastline, east coast of Nicaragua, an area that was just ravaged in 2021 and 2020 by those powerful storm systems. That's Saturday afternoon when that's approaching. There's still a chance that that northern track could verify. It all depends too on which clusters become dominant as it passes the Lesser Antilles. It could easily take a northern track into Belize. But that shows a pretty stout hurricane making landfall in Nicaragua, east central Nicaragua, by this weekend. Spinning down, likely leading to a big flooding event too over the eastern portion of the country. There's Bonnie, Hurricane Bonnie, coming in on the east coast of Nicaragua on Saturday. The disturbance in the northwestern Gulf will probably have dissipated by this time after potentially making a mega flood event over the Texas coastline, but still a lot of models need to come together for that solution. But we got to keep a very close eye on Bonnie. If it hugs the northern coast of South America, it'll still re-intensify on approach to Nicaragua. If it does take a slightly further north track, it can go just north of Honduras and maybe impacts Belize and the southern Yucatan as a potentially very powerful hurricane as well. So those are the scenarios that we need to watch. We are going to be activating our storm surge science once again. I've actually got one of those storm surge sensors right here in front of me. This is Surgeonator 2. We've got the gravitrons too to find the surface pressure field and track those gravity waves. We have the infrasound sensor. So looking forward to maybe chasing some of these tropical cyclones this year and doing some more science. This is the next tropical wave that has been given a low chance of development long term. This one could interact with the Greater Antilles. Some of the mountainous terrain of Hispaniola, Cuba downstream could delay development, but we'll have to keep an eye on this one as well very long term. Who knows if what that does in the Caribbean or the Gulf of Mexico downstream, if it's able to survive the high mountainous terrain of the Greater Antilles. So as we step forward in these tropical updates, we're going to be analyzing hurricane reconnaissance data to track the development of these systems. A lot of times they have to make estimates based on satellite data and other data to determine when these become tropical depressions and when they develop a closed low-level circulation. But when you're aided by hurricane reconnaissance aircraft, you can definitely detect exactly when they develop a low-level closed rotation or robustness. You can develop or take real observations inside of these storms, get an idea of what the real estimated surface pressures are based on data that are measured aloft by hurricane reconnaissance. Absolute heroes of hurricane science out there, those NOAA hurricane hunters, hurricane reconnaissance aircraft. So this is the 12Z GFS that shows a pretty strong impact by this tropical cyclone over eastern Nicaragua. We're going to have to keep an eye on that. We're going to keep an eye on the disturbance across the northern Gulf of Mexico. Thank you, everybody, for joining this live tropical update. Right now, the intertropical convergence zone is like something that we'd see during August, even though it is still its normal position relatively far south during the late summer. But we got that northern Gulf of Mexico disturbance to watch. We've got Bonnie. We've got another tropical wave with a low chance of development back behind it. Be sure to hit that notification bell, subscribe. We're going to be activating storm chase mode, and we do plan on covering all of these tropical cyclones and hurricanes from positions that are relatively difficult to attain. So thank everybody for tuning in to this live weather report. Never stop chasing.